Okay, welcome. I'm Yael Aronoff, Professor Yael. I'm Director of the Surley Institute for Jewish Studies in Modern Israel here at MSU, and we're thrilled to be able to kind of commemorate and think about International Holocaust Remembrance Day today through hearing from Alex Kor. We're really honored. I know he spoke to our Education Abroad program in Poland this summer, and students and professors who are there couldn't say enough about you, so we're really thrilled. Really quick, before we get started, I just wanted to let you know of some flyers that we have here. So on Friday, Jewish Studies and Muslim Studies and the Office of Excellence and Inclusion, they had been renamed, that's why I'm stumbling for a minute, although it's on here, have been working together for years to do workshops on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So if you're interested in that, this Friday, then myself and the Director of Muslim Studies, Mohammed Khalil, and Morgan Shipley and Ralph Johnson from that office are going to be giving information and mini lectures, but also having discussions over a complimentary lunch. So if you'd like, there are flyers here, and there's a QR code that you can register, so I would register as soon as you can. And also tomorrow we have a concert with two of our faculty at the Cook Recital Hall at 7:30 about Jewish diaspora music, so that might be something you're interested in if you'd like to go to more events this week. And I just wanted to thank very quickly our donors for the endowment that makes this possible. So Ed Brill and his sister Leslie Van Brandt created the Michael Brill Endowment to support teaching and research about the Holocaust in honor of their brother Michael, who really liked to learn a lot about the history of the Holocaust. So we've been having lectures related to the Holocaust for years, and we really thank you. You're probably going to be watching the recording of this lecture, so we can't thank you enough for that. And we'd also like to thank our many co-sponsors for this event this evening, which includes the College of Arts and Letters and the College of Social Science and the James Madison College and the Residential College of the Arts and Humanities, International Studies and Programs, the History Department. I think also the Hillel also co-sponsored this with us, and the Center for Eurasian and European Studies. So thank you to all those co-sponsors. We have a lot of support across the university, and we're really eager to hear from you to talk about the experiences of your parents who are Holocaust survivors, and thank you so much. We're really eager to learn from you.
Thank you. Thanks. Incredible audience here. Really appreciate it. So my name's Alex Kor, and I'm the son of two Holocaust survivors, and hopefully over the next 45 to 50 minutes, hopefully you'll be inspired, hopefully you'll be motivated. You might cry. I usually cry, so I have a little bit of a distraction. But my parents had this incredible sense of humor, and despite the subject matter, which is not easy for you to listen to, it's not easy for me to talk about, despite the subject matter, don't be surprised if here and there you may laugh. And I did say laugh. My parents had this incredible sense of humor, and I think I would be doing my parents a big disservice if I gave a lecture like this to an audience that wanted to learn about my parents, and if the audience didn't periodically laugh, my parents would not be so happy. So with that in mind, I'm a full-time podiatrist. I never thought I'd be doing this 6, 7, 8 years ago. And just to take you to July the 2nd, 2019, every year we go to Auschwitz, Candles Holocaust Museum, we go to Poland, and my mom and I were in our hotel room, and this is 6.5 years ago. And my mom had some heart issues earlier in the year, and she's playing on her social media, and I said, Mom, you know, you're 85 years old. At what point are you going to start slowing down? She looked at me like I was crazy. She goes, slow down. Alex, how can I slow down? There's so much hate, anti-Semitism, racism in the world. Unfortunately, my work is needed more than ever. 2 days later in that hotel room in Krakow, Poland, my mom died. And so that was July 4th, 2019. And so I never had an opportunity to ask my mom what my role should be. And so I've always thought of that experience, that time, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so with that in mind, hopefully I'll press the right button. Hey, look at that. So I have a co-author on the book. You can have a seat. There's some seats here and there. There's one right in front. And my co-author, who's not Jewish, would want to say two words. Very important that you understand that this is not a Jewish problem, this hate and anti-Semitism. It's a human being problem. And he always stresses when we speak that he's got two young daughters in high school and junior high, and that it's very important for him, for his kids, to understand what words can do and how words can turn into terrible actions. And so with that in mind, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my parents. So a lot of people ask, what's the idea of the title of the book? So when I was in podiatry school many moons ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. Some of you may know who Lance Armstrong is. So Lance Armstrong and I have something in common. No, I didn't date Sheryl Crow. No, I didn't do PEDs, and I definitely didn't win the Tour de France. We had the same cancer, testicular cancer, the same doctor at Indiana University. And so when I was in podiatry school, I thought I was going to die. It spread in my lung. I was 26 years old. And my mom keeps on calling me on my voicemail, and I kept on hitting delete. And she said, look, I know you're there. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. You need to understand, to what the slide says, you need to understand your dad's a survivor. I'm a survivor. You're going to be a survivor. This is your Auschwitz. And so obviously totally different foes, if you will, totally different problems to deal with. But when you hear your mom tell you these words, for me, I no longer felt sorry, and I was able to kind of beat cancer. And the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I think was never more true than with my situation years and years ago. So let's talk about, what I'm going to do is talk about my dad, and then talk about my mom, and then kind of put it all together. And then with a little technology help, we might have a surprise guest, with some of you saw that earlier. And so my father, which most people don't know, he was a Holocaust survivor as well. At least in Indiana, my mom's much more well known. My dad was from a very, very religious Jewish family from Riga, Latvia. And my dad was the youngest of four boys. My grandfather in 1939 was on his way to work, and the Nazis were beginning their occupation. Around that same year, my dad's second oldest brother, Zori, was part of the Latvian Navy, and they were near Gdansk, Danzig, and they found out he was Jewish, and they killed him and threw him overboard. 2 years later, 1941, the Nazis occupy Riga, and my grandfather, who happened to be a shoe cobbler, so I guess shoes and feet must run in our family. And so my grandfather's on his way to work wearing very traditional Jewish garb, and the restrictions were already in place, and he was walking, and the Nazis said, you go to the other side of the street. My grandfather kept on walking. They killed him immediately. No questions at all. So by the time my dad, which was the fall of 1941, by the time my father was 14, 15 years old, he had lost a brother and his father. The family is taken from their home to a ghetto, and obviously this audience will know it's not like a ghetto that perhaps we think about here in the United States. This is a ghetto where they took Jewish people to decide how to kill them, when to kill them, when to kill them, and how to kill them. And so my grandmother, Mirka, very religious, when they were taken from their home against their will, she put the tablecloth from the house, from the kitchen table, in her skirt. You might ask why. So in the ghetto, there was minimal food, minimal shelter. And so my grandmother thought it was very important for her son, my dad, age 14 or 15, to still have some semblance of normalcy, of being human. So on Friday night, on the ground, with no table, with no utensils, my grandmother put the tablecloth from their home on the ground so that my father would have some semblance of Shabbat dinner. We Jews have Shabbat dinner on Friday night. And so it was important for my grandmother, Mirka, to make sure that my dad still could feel human. My dad had two older brothers. They were in their 20s. And the ghetto was a typical ghetto, minimal shelter, minimal food, as I said. At some point, what they're going to do is liquidate the ghetto. Most of you know what that means. They're going to decide who's going to live and who's going to die. And so typically what they would do is put women, children, and elderly on one side of the ghetto, and men and younger men that could work on the other side of the ghetto. Even though my dad was 14 or 15, he looked younger. He was kind of a mama's boy. So he went to the side of the ghetto with his mother, Mirka. My dad's two brothers, still alive, Shlomo and Leo, went to the side for the work. My grandmother, Mirka, pleaded with my dad and said, look, you go with your two brothers. And my father said, no, if they kill you, my life's not worth living. They had an argument, and my grandmother won the argument. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. My dad goes with his brothers, Shlomo and Leo, on November the 30th, 1941, and then again on December the 8th, 1941, there was a massacre in Riga near the Rumble Forest, and that's where my grandmother died. A couple days after December the 8th, 1941, I'm still not sure how, my dad went to the site of the massacre and saw a baby doll. Again, young children were killed. I was in Riga a year and a half ago, and at the site of the memorial, I put a baby doll to symbolize that event. And so now my father is with his two brothers, Leo and Shlomo. They're in the ghetto for another 6 to 8 months, so probably into 1942. And then they're taken to a series of camps, Kaiserwald, the names aren't that important, Stutthof. Stutthof was a very, very deadly camp. En route to Stutthof, my uncle, my dad's brother Shlomo, kills a Nazi and escapes, ends up through Germany, and eventually ends up in the future Jewish homeland of Israel. A lot of particularly younger kids will say, well, why didn't the Jews fight back? My uncle did. And so now for the next 2 years, my father is with brother Leo. And now to kind of reset the time and the place, they were taken from Stutthof down into Germany near a series of camps called Buchenwald, which are pretty common, most people know about Buchenwald. So now it's April of 1945. My father and my uncle could sense the Nazis were losing the war. My dad would tell me when I was a little boy, he didn't like the Nazis when they're winning the war. Sure as heck didn't like the Nazis when they were losing the war. There's one seat up front if you want to sit. Sorry. So my dad would kind of use the analogy, when you see a wounded animal, they're probably more dangerous when they're wounded than they are when they're healthy. And so now it's April of 1945. They're on a death march. They're being taken by the Nazis to a safer area. And my dad thought to himself, and he's now 19 years old, he thought to himself, well, they're going to kill us anyway. I might as well make a go for it. And we still don't know the conversation between my dad and his uncle, and my uncle Leo. And so they're on a ravine, and it's dusk, and my dad sees a little break between two of the Nazis, so he makes a run for it. Years later, when my dad would lecture, everything was sports analogies, which you're going to find out why. So at the time when he first gave this lecture, the Indianapolis Colts had a running back named Edgerrin James. So he would tell kids he ran from the bullets like a running back was dodging tacklers. So he ran and he ran and he ran. They shot after him. They didn't send the dogs. And he hid in the ruins of a building. The rumor was, and this is April of 45, the rumor was that the Americans were in the area to liberate. So now my dad's hiding in the ground, and he's got lice on him, clothes are in shambles, and he doesn't know what to do. And then there's fierce fighting for a couple hours. He's definitely now worried he's going to get hit by an errant bullet, an errant grenade, still hiding with lice crawling all over him. And then he hears silence. Should he come out? Should he stay in the hole in the ground? Then after about 2 hours, he hears this weird language. My dad was very good with languages. He knew it wasn't German, it wasn't Russian, it wasn't Hebrew, it wasn't Latvian. Maybe it's the Americans. So he comes up with his hands up. 2 American GIs give my dad a Coca-Cola. One of the GIs, named Wendell Knox from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, asked my dad, how does it feel to be free? My dad knew the word free. He said, good. From that point on, Coca-Cola was like my dad's champagne. So the two GIs were part of the battalion, the 250th Battalion, led by Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Neff from this place called Terre Haute, Indiana. So for 2 days, Mr. Knox and the other GI hid my father from their leader, their commander. This battalion was primarily responsible for building bridges. Mr. Neff was a civil engineer from Rose Holman in Terre Haute. And the third day, Mr. Neff found out about my father. And my dad was still in the raggedy clothes. And Mr. Neff kind of interrogated him and said, thought he's probably going to be a liability. Why should we keep him? Well, my dad was very impressive. He could be used as a translator, knew the languages, knew the terrain. So Mr. Neff thought, well, he's not going to be a liability. He's going to be a major asset. So they gave him GI clothes. One thing I always fail to remember, the date that my dad was liberated, April 15th with a Coca-Cola. Years later, my birthday is April 15th. I didn't know this until we did the research for the book. And so now it's late April, early May. My dad now is hanging out with the GIs. He's reading English. There's a military newspaper some of you may know called Stars and Stripes. He was reading English, talking English, speaking, writing, so he became like one of the guys. And he thought, oh, these Americans are pretty cool. So now they get to a dangerous area, and Mr. Neff says, Mickey, I know you have a gun. You don't know how to use a gun. I can't take a chance on you being killed or hurt, so I've got to put you in a refugee camp. And my dad looked at Mr. Neff and said, Mr. Neff, I want to go where you're from, wherever this place called Terre Haute is. So my father is in a refugee camp, starts writing letters. One of the letters ends up on the doorstep of Mrs. Neff on 25th Street in Terre Haute, Indiana. By now, Mr. Neff's in Great Britain. And Mrs. Neff telegrams her husband and says, you got to help that little boy. So Mr. Neff contacts by telegram the two GIs, Mr. Knox. They get my dad out of the refugee camp. And for the next year, post-war, my dad helps the GIs in what they were doing. My father, after the war, was hanging out in bars and restaurants with the GIs. If you look closely, this is a Coca-Cola malt. Everything was Coca-Cola. Non-stop Coca-Cola for years and years. So that's a letter. And my dad was now writing letters to Mr. Neff back in Terre Haute. And Mr. Neff was already thinking ahead. My dad's 4 years of high school were 4 years of concentration camp. So Mr. Neff, even though my dad was now 20, thought, well, let's get this kid. We're going to bring him to the United States. He's got to go to high school. And so, so Mr. Neff used all these letters, got my dad enrolled in the local university, the local high school in Terre Haute. So May the 11th, 1946, my dad boards the boat, the SS Marine Flasher, with 7 other Holocaust survivors from Germany to New York, and gets to New York and takes a train to this place called Terre Haute. So when my dad was a little boy, he played soccer. Well, I don't think here in Lansing, Michigan in 1947, 48, there was no soccer. There was definitely no soccer in Terre Haute. Everybody in Indiana played basketball. So my father finishes high school in 1 year. On a really good day, my dad was 5'2", but he wanted to learn how to play basketball because that's how you could meet people. He was really involved in sports. So he enrolls at the local university. Do I have any basketball fans? A few basketball fans? Okay. So my father enrolls at the local university, which is Indiana State Teachers College, which is now Indiana State University, which beat your Spartans in 1979, but we won't talk about that. And so, actually lost to your Spartans. I take that back. My bad. So in 1947, my dad enrolls at Indiana State University, Indiana State Teachers College, and he's very excited because in his first set of subjects, he's got the gym class. And the rumor was that the gym class was taught by the basketball coach. Some of you might know that basketball coach, some guy by the name of Coach John Wooden. Now, for those young people that don't know who that is, Coach Wooden was an All-American at Purdue. This was his first college coaching job. And years later, he coached somebody named Bill Walton, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Well, he was my dad's gym teacher. And so My dad, I don't know about you, but when I was in gym class in high school and college, I didn't study. Well, my dad was very studious, he studied. So halfway through the semester, Coach Wooden pulls my dad aside and says, Mickey, and my dad thought he was in trouble. Mickey, I need to talk to you. What did I do? What did I do, Mr. Wooden? Oh, no, you're doing everything right, but you're doing such a good job in helping the other kids because they were all younger than my dad. I need you to take the class next semester. You're going to get an A this semester. You're going to get an A next semester. I know you want to go to pharmacy school. So they became friends. The following year, Coach Wooden goes off to UCLA, wins 10 national titles. My dad goes to Purdue University, becomes a pharmacist. Years later, Coach Wooden comes back to Terre Haute to be honored with some guy. I don't know if you've heard of him, Larry Bird. So my mom took this picture. This is my dad and Coach Wooden. Years later, I think Coach Wooden died a couple years later. When I was a little kid, we'd watch basketball games, and my dad would say, there's my gym teacher. And then probably by the time I was 6 or 7, we would get letters every October from Coach Wooden. Dear Mickey, I hope your family's doing good. I have this new player. His name is Lou Alcindor. I think he should be pretty good. Obviously, that's now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hall of Famer. So that's a little bit about my dad's story. I know that was quick. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about my mom. Some of you may know. I know that she was a real estate agent for somebody in the back, which is interesting. So my mom and my dad did not know each other during the war. Very important that you understand. My mom also from a very religious Jewish family from the Transylvanian Valley. There were 2 older girls that were already born, and my grandfather, Alexander, who I'm named after, desperately wanted a boy. And so now my grandmother is pregnant again. There's no ultrasound, obviously. And so the midwife comes to deliver, and hoping against hope there'd be a boy, out comes a girl. But then the midwife says, oh, wait, there's another one coming. And with even greater disappointment, Eva, my mom, is born. So my mom always felt like she was a black sheep of the family. By the time she was 3 or 4, her dad would punish her, and she always thought it was because she wasn't a boy. Sometimes he would, before dinner, would say his prayers, and my mom's job was to keep all the animals from the farm away from him so he could do his prayers. And unfortunately, there'd be some cat underneath the couch, and my mom would get in trouble and get spanked. And my mom always felt like she was the one that was the brunt of all his punishment. And so for many years when they were young, just so if you know history, this part of Europe, the Transylvanian Valley, was supposedly going to be safe from the Nazis. 1941, 42, my dad was already in a camp. My mom was living a normal life. A normal life for her was on this farm. They were the only Jewish family. My grandfather owned this land, and all the people in the community worked on the farm. And things were normal. And then 1942, 43, my mom's 6, 7 years old. After dinner, the girls were put into a room with play with dolls, and their parents in another room listened to the radio. So my mom, kind of the troublemaker, puts her ear to the door and hears somebody in German yelling something against the Jews. It was Hitler. She could sense, 6, 7 years old, that something bad was going to happen. She said, Daddy, we should go. The border's close. We should leave. And he said, oh, stupid little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Just do your chores, do your prayers. We'll take care of everything. And my mom always, always, always resented him and my grandmother for that. So sure enough, things start to get worse. 1943, their teacher at school gets replaced by somebody that's more of a Nazi sympathizer. And my mom and my aunt remember a math equation. They're in math class. If you have 5 Jews and you kill 2 Jews, how many Jews are left? That was a math problem on the board. My mom and my aunt went home. Mommy, why do we have to take this? All the kids make fun of us at school. Why do we have to take this? Well, my grandmother said, well, we don't have a choice. They had a window of opportunity to leave. That window had now closed. And sure enough, in 1944, similar to my dad's story, they're taken from their home, put in a ghetto. This picture to the far right is the last family picture taken. For whatever reason, my mom's always on the left. My mom, my aunt, my mom, my aunt. The tall gentleman in the black coats, my grandfather Alexander. The 2 girls to his right and left are the 2 older girls. My grandmother in the polka dot dress. The girl to the far right is a family friend, and the little boy is a cousin. The family friend, when they were in the ghetto, Her father was a minister, a preacher in the town. She threw food across the barbed wire to the other girls, to my mom and her sisters, so they would have food. Years later, her name's Lucy. Years later, we went back to Romania, Hungary, Romania, and she was still alive. So they're in the ghetto. They have no idea where, nobody's telling them, well, you'll be here for 2 weeks and then you'll go home. Nobody said anything. And sure enough, similar to my dad's story, they're put on a cattle car. People call them trains. When I'm in a train, I'm sitting. Well, there's nowhere to sit. There were 100 people in the cattle car, a little peephole. Periodically, the cattle car would stop, and through the peephole, they could get a little spritz of water for gold watches. So my grandfather was in charge of his cattle car, and every 7 or 8 hours, using Hungarian as a language, they would exchange gold watches for a little spritz of water. There was no food. If you died, you were either thrown overboard or put in a corner. The bathroom was the other corner. This went on for 3 days. Then the next stop, the language was no longer Hungarian. It was German. They knew they were in trouble. They knew they were heading into Nazi Germany. And so sure enough, the cattle car starts slowing down prematurely. And my grandfather, Alexander, takes the family in the corner, and he didn't know where they were at, but he knew it wasn't good. And he said, look, if anybody survives where we're about to go, you go to the future Jewish homeland of Israel. Cattle car doors open. It's nighttime. Chaos. My mom and my aunt are 10 years old. They step off the cattle car onto the selection platform. It's a big step. And my mom looks around and sees people, mass chaos, dogs barking, people screaming, crying, gunshots. And then she looks and realizes her father is nowhere to be seen. Her 2 older sisters, nowhere to be seen. She's holding on to her mom's arm. My aunt's on the other side. And they're standing like this. My mom and my aunt are little red dresses. Dressed alike, obviously looked alike. A Nazi's running up and down the selection platform, yelling, twins, twins, in German. A Nazi approaches my grandmother and says, are they twins? Before she says yes, 3 Nazis jump out, separate my mom and my aunt from their mother. The last thing my mom remembers is her mother being dragged away, pulled away, screaming and crying. If my mom were here today, she would tell you the one regret she has was that she did not know this was the last time she would see her mother. She never had a chance to say goodbye. 10 years old. They're taken, my mom and my aunt are taken from the selection platform to a barracks where they're tattooed. My mom's number is A7063. My aunt's number is A7064. That night, they're taken to a barracks, all girl twins, ages 3 to 15. They're given something that looks like bread. My mom and my aunt will announce, we're not eating this. We're kosher. We're not eating this until we see our parents. And one of the older twins says, well, don't worry about your parents. See the smoke in the distance? That's where your parents are. And my mom says, oh, that's crazy. Who would be burning bodies? And the older twin says, oh, you'll find out tomorrow. You'll meet who's in charge. So the next morning at 5 in the morning, roll call. Somebody walks into the barracks and says, Mengele is coming. Mengele is coming. Mengele comes in with his entourage to inspect his new victims, his new twins. My mom was part of medical research, quote unquote research. 3,000 twins were experimented on, 1,500 sets of 2, boys and girls. The question here, why was she not sent to the gas chamber? I just told you with my father's story that if he would have gone with his mother, my grandmother, he would have been killed. The only reason my mom at the age of 10 was not killed was she was being used in medical experiments. If my mom was not a twin, I wouldn't be here. As I said, there were 3,000 twins, 1,500 sets of 2. This is from the Auschwitz Museum. It's a little hard to see, but 12 and 13, Marian Mozes and Eva Mozes. That's my mom and my aunt. This is a more complete list, but this is from the Auschwitz Museum. Kinder, of course, is German for children. And so this started in May of 44, and I always hesitate to compare stories, but I have 2 parents who are survivors, so it's somewhat easy for me. May of 44, my dad had already been in a camp or in a ghetto for 3 years. And so my mom got there in May of 44, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were the dangerous experiments. Things were injected, blood drawn, blood injected. If one twin died during the experiments, they would kill the other twin and do comparative autopsies. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, not the dangerous experiments, lying naked boys and girls, their body parts measured, their thumb length measured to the twin, to a chart, to other twins. Those are very demeaning but not dangerous. So this started in May of 44, a couple anecdotal stories along the way. August of 44, one day there's no guard in front of the guard tower, right in front of the twins' barracks. So my mom looks around, it's really hot out, and then she looks up and sees a plane circling Auschwitz. Then she looks really close to the plane, it has a smoke signal, but there's an American flag on the back of the plane. When I heard this story when I was a little older than you, I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. How would you know there was an American flag? There's no TV, there's definitely no internet. How would you know that? Well, Alex, when I was a little girl in Romania, in Transylvania, we had an aunt in Cleveland, Ohio. And every 4 or 5 months, we'd get a letter from the aunt in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was a troublemaker, so I always opened up the envelope. On the envelope was a stamp, the American flag. Sorry. So, the reason I tell you this, my mom would tell you that from the time she stepped off that selection platform, she could no longer think like a 10-year-old. Every day was a chance to live, but every day was a chance to die. So she had to put 2 and 2 together. The stamp on the envelope and the plane matched. So she thought, that's got to be an American plane. It was a reconnaissance mission circling Auschwitz so they would not bomb inside the camp. Years later, when she was lecturing somewhere, she met one of the pilots from the plane, but it gave her hope that at least they knew that there was somebody in the camp that they were trying to, it gave her hope to the point that she could live another day. Her whole motto every day was live another day, survive another experiment. And so the fall of 44, the experiments continued. Another story or two. One time, my mom is injected with something, and Mengele looks at her and says, too bad, she only has 2 weeks to live. My mom started developing a bad fever. My mom and my aunt were separated. My aunt was put into isolation. My mom was put into the barracks. She always termed it the barracks of the living dead. On TV Today or in April for Yom HaShoah, they show a little person crawling on the floor. That's not my mom, but my mom was in those barracks. And she would tell me when people stopped moving, they would just throw them on a truck. They were dead. So she was in those barracks, and she knew that there was a faucet at the end of the barracks, so she would crawl, passing in and out of consciousness. I must survive, I must survive. She finally got some water, and her fever started getting better. And so finally, she was reunited after about 3 or 4 weeks with my aunt. When my aunt was in isolation, they were injecting her with something. We'll come back to that. And so now they're together again, and a couple weeks later now, they could sense, similar to my dad's story, we're now in November or so of 44, that the Nazis were losing the war. They weren't in the guard towers every day. The experiments were not 6 days a week. They were maybe 3 or 4 days a week. One day, my mom is hungry. No Nazis around, so my mom and 2 other twins volunteer to organize food. That's code word for steal food. So they went to the kitchen and put a bunch of potatoes in their dress. They turn around, 2 Nazis, machine guns. The last thing my mom remembers is the rifle pointed at her head. She wakes up. She thinks she's in the hereafter. She touches the 2 bodies, the 2 other girls, ice cold. She realized what had happened. She had fainted before the bullet hit her. She always told my sister and I that she always had a guardian angel, and this was proof to her that she had a guardian angel. So she went back to the barracks with the other twins to tell their 2 sisters, and unfortunately their sisters had just been killed. Those same 2 Nazis were burning up the buildings, the barracks, and so they found the twins and marched them from Auschwitz II, which is Birkenau, to Auschwitz I. They get to Auschwitz I, the Nazis disappeared, all the girls run into a barracks seeking shelter. And similar to my dad's story, they could hear fighting in the distance. We're now in December of 44, and they could hear fighting in the distance. So one question that people ask is, what was the reason for the experiments? This is still debated to this day. I've probably met over the years 80 or 90 twins. To a person, they would all say that they knew they were being used for fertility experiments. In their mind, they were twins. The Germans wanted to perpetuate their race. And so they thought they were being used for fertility experiments. David Marwell wrote a book about 6-7 years ago, and he contended, which, again, I'm not a geneticist, I'm a podiatrist, that to do that, you would have to test the mothers of the twins, which to me inherently makes more sense. But nonetheless, they were using these experiments. And so now it's January 45, it's snowing, similar to what it is today. Very cold, similar as is today. And now my mom's in block 24. If you've been to Auschwitz, she's on the second floor. She couldn't even see outside the window. It's January 27th, 81 years ago today. 81 years ago today. My mom's, the other twin, sees something moving in the distance and says, wait, I think I see something. It was the Ukrainian army, the Soviets coming to liberate, dressed in white camouflage because of the snow. All the girls run out. The Soviets give them cookies and candy and milk and honey and say, we're coming back in a couple weeks. This is a picture that's commonly known as the January 27th liberation. This is my mom. This is my aunt. So let me tell you a little story. So when we would go back to Auschwitz, my mom would argue with the Auschwitz tour guides. That's not January 27th. Well, my mom was partly right, actually more than partly right. Sure enough, they were liberated on January 27th. The Soviets came back into February. The twins were on their own for 3 or 4 weeks. The Soviets came back with big motion picture cameras. My mom, to her dying day, loved attention. So I've seen the video. The camera's here. When this starts, my mom's in the middle. She ran all the way to the front to be in the front. They did this 5 times. On the 5th try, they just had a birthday. My mom's birthday is the 31st. This was February 10th. My mom sticks out her tongue like a typical 11-year-old, like, I want to go home. This is enough of this. So this picture, the 2 ladies in white with the Red Cross, the 2 little girls, I'm sorry if I'm blocking you, 2 little girls that look like hoodies. They're not hoodies, they're scarves. Those are the Changara twins. To my knowledge, the Changara twins are the only set of twins still alive. They live in Israel. They were a little younger than my mom and my aunt. Their mother was good friends with my grandmother. So after the war, where does my mom go? My mom and my aunt desperately wanted to go, I'll leave it here, desperately wanted to go home. They end up in an orphanage in Katowice, which is close by. And Mrs. Changara, the mother of those twins, goes to the orphanage, says she's related, and signs them out. Now, 8 months later, after traveling all over Belarus, they were in Ukraine, everywhere, they end up getting back to their village. My mom and my aunt thought, well, surely they're 11 years old, they survived. Surely their parents and their older sisters had to survive, right? Wrong. They get to the house, hoping against hope. The only thing that survived was a family dog. My mom would tell you the Nazis killed people, they didn't kill dogs. They move into a neighboring city in Cluj, Romania. And in Cluj, they had an aunt, my grandfather's sister. She had lost her husband and a son. And my mom desperately missed human affection. Sorry. She asked her aunt, would you give us a hug or a kiss? No, I don't do that. I make you food. I give you a clean bed. You have a shower. I don't give hugs and kisses. And so finally, 1950, and this is also during the time of communist Romania. My mom didn't like the Nazis, didn't get along with the communists either. So now they eventually go to Israel on a visa. My mom, my aunt, their aunt, they arrive, and they're in a kibbutz, which some of you know what a kibbutz is, kind of a commune. It's all Holocaust survivors from all over Europe, boys and girls aged 15, 16, or 17. I asked my mom, so how was it being in a kibbutz with other teenagers? She said, Alex, it's the best time of my life. I learned how to say I love you in 10 languages. You're paying attention, good. Some audiences don't laugh at that. Okay, so my mom and my aunt were in the Israeli army. Again, my mom on the left. My aunt was a nurse. My mom was a draftswoman, architect. So now my aunt is about to get married to a Sabra. Kuti Zeiger, and my mom was dating a guy, and she really fell in love with him about the same time, age 27. The future mother-in-law of the guy she was dating, the guy's mother, wants to meet my mom. So she asked my mom, so tell me about your family. I want my future daughter-in-law to come from a big family. And my mom says, family? I lost 119 family members in the Holocaust. I have one sister. The future mother-in-law breaks off the engagement. My mom was heartbroken. So now we're going to kind of put the story together. So now my father, after being a pharmacist, there was no internet dating in 1959 or 1960. That's another joke. And so my dad comes to visit Shlomo. Shlomo had survived. He worked for Mahariv newspaper, Israeli newspaper. You probably know it. My pronunciation's terrible. And then Uncle Leo was in Connecticut. And so Shlomo works at a newspaper, and my dad's coming. So my uncle thinks, well, I'm going to put a personal ad in the newspaper. My mom would never tell the story, so with her approval. So in the ad, it said, my brother's coming. He's a Holocaust survivor to meet a wife. My mom saw it, and the reason that she was interested was because it was a Holocaust survivor. He would understand that she didn't have a family. My dad lost 80 family members. So they went on 3 dates. My dad spoke no Hebrew. My mom spoke no English. Everything was dictionaries. On the third date, my dad asked my mom a question. She said yes. He puts a ring on their finger. They're engaged. They had a wedding celebration on Dizengoff Street at a synagogue. And my mom was in the Israeli army, so she took time to get out of the army. So my dad went back to Terre Haute, working as a pharmacist. And so it took several months for my mom to get out of the army. Just a little quick funny story. So my mom flies into New York. Leo, my dad's brother, who spoke no English, met my mom at the airport with his wife. His wife gives my mom a corsage. Women in Israel didn't wear corsages. My mom had a cousin there who spoke Hebrew, and to the cousin in Hebrew, she says, what is this stupid flower? I want to take this stupid flower off. And the cousin in Hebrew says, no, don't take it off. Wait till you get to the restaurant and say you're hot. Get to the restaurant. My mom says, hot, takes off the jacket. Everybody orders a steak well. So my mom wanted to be very debonair, and so when it came to her chance, she said, well. When the steak came out, it was like a brick. So that night, they get to Hartford, Connecticut, where Leo lived. They call my dad, and my dad, again with dictionaries on both sides, my dad says, Eva, my friends, they want to throw you shower. So my mom's thinking it's a mikveh, religious. And so she looks up, shower, and she gets very red. She goes, Mickey, tell your friends thank you very much, but I take shower alone. That was my mom's first day in the United States. So I was born a couple years later in Terre Haute. My first language, as I was telling somebody, was Hebrew. I'm not fluent anymore, but I was fluent until I was 5 years old. I have a younger sister, and I thought we had a normal family. Every other year, every couple years, we'd go to Israel. People talk about the camps. I knew my mother had a number. My dad didn't, because if you know, only people that were Auschwitz had numbers. My dad did not have a number. I thought we were normal. We did the normal American things. We went to St. Louis, played tennis. And then things started to change a little bit. When I was in 5th grade, the custom around Halloween, at least in Terre Haute, was kids would throw corn at a house and run to the next house. These are all my classmates, 5th graders. When the corn hit our house, it sounded like a bomb was blowing up. My mom said, what's that? I said, oh, kids are just throwing corn. It brought back terrible memories, post-traumatic stress, terrible memories from my mom. The next day, she hid in the front yard behind a tree. As the kids were throwing corn, she started chasing the kids around the neighborhood. They thought she was crazy. My mom would call their parents. Can't your kids take it? Oh, Eva, they're just having fun. Nobody talked about the Holocaust. Nobody knew anything about the Holocaust. This went on for 2 Octobers in a row. And then my mom got really smart, kind of out of sight, out of mind. Flights to Israel in October were cheap. So every October for years, 25 years, she would go to Israel. They would throw corn at the house. My dad would just turn off the light or take a nap, and the fun quickly died out. And so just a couple other stories, and then hopefully we'll have this surprise guest. So one of the defining moments, at least for me, I was in high school, there was a mini-series, some of you may remember, Roots. About 2 years later on NBC, there was a mini-series, which was a big deal at the time to have a mini-series on TV called Holocaust. And the local NBC affiliate found out my mom, she wasn't giving lectures, was a survivor. So they invited our family to watch the last night in the studio. And the very last scene, it's my dad, my sister, me, and my mom. The very last scene, there's a little boy after liberation kicking a soccer ball. Look over at my father, crying hysterically. I had never seen. Sorry. I had never seen my dad cry, let alone hysterically. And then with my mom's emotions in check, she gave a really good presentation on the news that night, the local news. So I left as a high school student realizing I needed to help my dad kind of come to terms with his past and encourage my mom to speak. And that's pretty much through high school and early college. And then in 1985, my mom, beside my aunt, found another Mengele twin. They decided to form an organization called Candles. As you can see, they found 122 twins, 10 countries, 4 continents. And my mom always was very impressed when she got a letter in the mail from somebody who was a president of a company. So, of course, she named herself president. My aunt Marian was vice president, and they had a whole board of Mengele twins. And so I thought, well, this is pretty good. Mom, you're going to now continue with your life. She was a real estate agent. Well, that didn't work out so well. So the following year, 1985, we go to Auschwitz. The weird thing for me was that I never had textbooks about the Holocaust. You know, in some states now, this Holocaust education is mandated. Back then, there was no Holocaust education. My parents were my textbooks. And for me, it was really odd that I knew where everything was. I mean, I'd heard these stories since I was a little kid, but I knew where everything was. I knew where the selection platform was. I knew where my mom's barracks was, etc. A couple of things here, and then we'll close things up. So my mom, after having the 1985 reunion, because we also had a mock trial of Mengele at Yad Vashem the following week, my mom realized a lot of the twins are starting to have health problems. So this is in the Capitol Rotunda, Washington, D.C. Elie Wiesel was speaking. My mom didn't make a sound. She had a sign up to support reparations money for all the Mengele twins, not for herself, on behalf of the other twins. Didn't make a sound. David Wells was the first day on the job. He very innocently approached my mom and said, "Do you have a permit from the placard?" My mom said, "There's my permit, the number." His boss comes up and says, "Let's get her out of here." They drag her out. I didn't know the story. David Wells has since become a friend. They take her downstairs. This guy wanted to put her in jail, and David says, no. You can't look at her left arm. She's a survivor. So that she gets a warning, but she was traumatized. She came back to Terre Haute, and I remember her telling me she thought her car was bombed. I said, "Mom, I think it's about time. You know, you've done a good job. You need to move on." How can I move on? And you know, when things are bad and they get worse, how do you respond? How do you pick yourself off the mat? So, you know, sure enough, the same year I had cancer, my mom's twin, my aunt, goes into kidney failure in 1987. And so that same year when my aunt went into kidney failure, my mom flew to Israel and Jerusalem. My mom donated one of her kidneys. When they took the kidney out of my aunt's body, it had not developed beyond the age of 10. Remember, when she was in isolation, she was injected with something. The possibility was that whatever they injected ruined one of her kidneys. For 2 or 3 years, the transplant went very well. And then in 1991, she started to develop urinary tract polyps. The same doctor that treated me and Lance Armstrong brought her to Indianapolis and gave her free chemo for a year. She did well, but then died in June of 1993. My mom, with her strange sense of humor, was very, very depressed, but she said, you know, not only did I lose my sister, I lost one kidney. So how do you get off the mat? She didn't know where her focus would be. What could she do? So she gets a strange phone call a couple months later from a Dr. John Michalczyk from Boston College, and is a PhD, and he says, "Eve, I'm sorry to hear about Miriam. I know you've been lecturing. Do you want to lecture to doctors? Are you ready to start lecturing again?" And my mom says, "Oh, I love lecturing to those doctors. They think they know everything. I'd like to give them a piece of my medicine." And then he said something strange, and he said, "Eva, maybe, you know a lot of people. Maybe you could bring with you to the meeting in Boston one of those Nazi doctors." And my mom said, "Dr. Michalczyk, where do you think I could find one of those guys?" The last time I looked, they were not advertising in the yellow pages. That's a phone book for young people that probably means nothing now. So Dr. Michalczyk said, "Eva, I'm sure you'll think of something." Well, the last project that my mom and my aunt worked on was for a German network, ZDF. And the very last scene, after the entire package of the movie was done, there was a Nazi doctor named Hans Mutsch. Hans Mutsch worked alongside Mengele. He's the only Nazi doctor that was not killed or put in prison. Why? Because he refused to do selections. And he also helped save 20-some Jewish doctors. So my mom found out about Dr. Munch's story and thought, well, surely he'll come to Boston. So my mom contacted the Munch family in Germany, and the response was, oh, he'll give you an interview, Eva, but he ain't coming to Boston. You got to go to Germany. My mom was petrified to go to Germany. Anytime she was on a plane, if it was a Lufthansa flight, she would freak out anytime she heard German. This is years later. And of course, this is, in the 90s. So my mom gets convinced to go. A Dutch TV crew accompanies my mom. And my mom now already had a new thought. Well, surely he worked alongside Mengele. I want to help the other Mengele twins avoid the same predicament as my twin. He's got to know what was injected into us. So first question, Dr. Munch's very middle-class neighborhood, very middle-class house. Cameras are rolling. Dr. Munch, what do you know about Dr. Mengele's experiments? Eva, I don't know anything. He kept everything to himself, but I have nightmares. My mom said, whoa, you have nightmares? I thought we were the only ones with the nightmares. Why do you have nightmares, Dr. Munch? Well, beyond helping save this 20-some Jewish doctors, periodically I had to stand outside the gas chamber. And when the last body stopped moving, I would sign one death certificate. I relive this every day. And my mom said, and my mom was always a quick thinker, and she said, Dr. Munch, so you know how the operation of the gas chamber worked? He went on in great detail to tell my mom the operation of the gas chamber, the medical experiments, everything. And my mom said, and this is 1993, not now, my mom said, Dr. Munch, a lot of people in the world say the Holocaust didn't occur. It really wasn't 6 million, it might have been a couple thousand. You need to come with us to Auschwitz in January of 1995 for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz to tell the world what you just told me. Would you do that? Sure. My mom comes back to Terre Haute. I wasn't living there. I called her, how did the trip go? She goes, oh, he doesn't know anything about the experiments, but he's coming with us to Auschwitz in January of 95. I go, Mom, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't care what you think. Now I need to figure out a way to thank a Nazi doctor for documenting history. How do you do that? I said, I don't know. My mom went to the local Hallmark card shop looking for a thank you card. For 2.5 hours, Eva, what are you looking for? I'm just looking. My parents didn't drink alcohol much. We went to a liquor store. Nothing seemed appropriate. For months, she was thinking, how do you thank somebody? What's the highest honor? A couple months before January of 95, she calls me and she says, I figured it out. In my name only, and I emphasize that, in my name only, I'm going to thank Dr. Munch. And the way I'm going to thank him, in my name only, is I'm going to forgive him. I said, Mom, I don't know about that. I don't care what you think. I think this is the perfect way to thank another human being. I'm going to give him a gift. So my mom's fifth language was English. She was always worried about her grammar. So she went to her local English professor at Indiana State University and said, Dr. Kaufman, I need you to read this document because at some point somebody in history is going to read this document. Dr. Kaufman said, Eva, there's no mistakes, but I think you're forgiving the wrong guy. No. I want to thank Dr. Munch and Dr. Munch for doing what he's doing. Well, you should think about it, Eva. So on January 27th, 1995, what's that, 30 years ago today, 31 years ago today, this is my mom and Dr. Munch on the way to the ceremony, which is at the ruins of a gas chamber. Very important you understand, we're almost done. Dr. Munch knew nothing about my mom's forgiveness. We didn't tell them, she didn't tell them. True to his word, he told the world what he had told my mom in his living room. And then my mom surprised him and said, despite all the pain that Nazis have caused me, I want to thank you. And the way I'm going to thank you is I'm going to forgive you. This is the highest honor I could give you. I remember there was a reporter from Bulgaria. He said, Eva, what about Dr. Mengele? No, I just want to thank and forgive Dr. Munch. Several months later, she started realizing that she didn't have this chip on her shoulder anymore. Beyond that, she really hated her parents, so she thought, I'm going to forgive my mom, I'm going to forgive my dad, I'm going to forgive myself for hating my parents, I'm going to forgive Dr. Mengele, all in my name only, and then also I'm going to forgive all Nazis in my name only. I said, Mom, that last part, people are going to criticize you, I know, but I don't want another Nazi doctor coming forth and saying, well, I worked alongside Mengele, I want you to forgive me too. She wanted to move forward with her life, didn't want to look backward, and I truly believe it gave her another 20-some years of her life, much happier, much healthier, etc. Just go through this. One quick thing, I think it's important for young people. My dad had some life lessons, somewhat straightforward. be honest, be hardworking, be humble, always say thank you. And, you know, toward the end of my dad's life, he was about as tough as they come. And then from my mom, her life lessons probably a little bit more worldly. Never give up, prevent prejudice, you know, by judging people on the content of their character and their actions, not by the way they look. Forgive your worst enemy, will heal your soul and set you free. For all you young people here, give your parents an extra hug. And then, to cum alum, each of us be the change you want to be. So do I have any questions? But thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I know this room's a little cramped, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll talk over dinner, but I'm the chair in Holocaust Studies and European Jewish History here at MSU.
Right?
What?
Did you study?
Here at MSU, but I did my
but-
PhD at Indiana.
Yeah.
And so I, knew a lot about candles and about your mom and everything when I was there. But I have a very easy question, which is, can you talk more about other family, your family? If you said you have a sister, does she have family? Kind of what's...
So, other family. So I'm still single, still Jewish, still looking. So I don't have, if you know of anybody, let me know. My sister would not do this for $1 million. She went on multiple trips, and then over the last 10 years, she gradually kind of drifted away from being involved. She lives in California. Leo, my Uncle Leo has one son, my cousin in Hartford. The rest of the family, so Marian, my mom's twin, has 3 daughters. 2 of them I keep contact with. They live in Israel, all 3 of them do. Shlomo, the one who killed the Nazi, has 3 kids. One of them's Eva Kor, which a lot of Israelis know. He's kind of the Anderson Cooper, perhaps a good analogy. I have a cousin, 2 other cousins. One worked in security, worked for El Al. And so, some are involved and some are not so involved. My sister's definitely not involved at all. And, for me in writing the book, I don't know if I have any 2 Gs or 3 Gs or 4 Gs in here, but one of the kind of the reasons we wrote the book, hey, there she is. And I can ask it and then we'll, yeah. So that's a little bit about the family. Just one little interesting side note. My mom was on the Larry King radio show before he was on CNN. Larry King's not his last name, it's Zeiger. And so my mom during a commercial said, Larry, I know your last name's not King, it's Zeiger. Eva, how do you know that? Well, I've done my research. Well, there are 2 brothers in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Zeiger. One brother went to Philadelphia. Apparently his grandson's Larry King. The other brother went to Israel. His grandson is my uncle's Kuti, who married my aunt. And just recently I was in Philadelphia, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. A guy approached me. My last name's Zeiger. And I said, wow, you're probably related. So we've been in touch. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
So yes, in the back, the Terahoshan, former.
I just want you to know you had a sentence there that says, I hope you would be proud of me.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity, my husband and I lived here 27 years ago, or actually longer than that, and he got his PhD, and we went to Indiana State University. He taught there for 28 years. I met his mom because she was our real estate lady. She's a fabulous woman. What you see is exactly what he said of her sense of humor, and just the depth of her compassion and love. It was a wonderful opportunity that my husband and I and our family had to share. And I remember we sat down in our living room, and when I first met her, and she looked at me, and I'll tell you, it was the hardest thing I had ever heard anyone say. You were the age when my mom died, and I had the same number of siblings that you have with your family. And it was just heart-wrenching to know that what she experienced, and I forget, but she always called herself, when she was in the camp, she had a name for her own self. Besides a survivor, there was something where she was proud of herself for being so clever. because she was always getting herself out of some troubles.
Probably a Yiddish or Hebrew word, but I want to make sure that it might be chutzpah. So these are, my mom died July 4th, 2019. She wanted to speak at the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. She was preparing this speech. She died before she could give the speech. 2 days before her speech, Michael Berenbaum, who most people know, Holocaust scholar, years earlier, he criticized my mom's, forgiveness. But he came to the hotel 2 days in a row to help her with the speech, and then he gave the speech on January 27th, 2020. And also Stephen Smith helped out, but that's why you have this. And I have hopefully more copies if you want. It's the reason I bring it up, if you read it's 2019, my mom was very prophetic, unfortunately, about the anti-Semitism in the world. I'm going to do this here in a second. Does anybody have any other questions for me? Yes, Emma, you have a good question.
What was the name of the kibbutz that your mother and her sister were at?
I don't know. People have asked me that. I need to get the name of it. I don't know.
Okay.
Good question. I'll get back to you. I have your email address. Okay. So this is a hologram. Yes, my mom unfortunately passed away. Let's see if the microphone works. Eva, tell us about high school.
We went to high school in the big city where my aunt lived for 5 years. And we were just about ready to, at age 16, we were very advanced, ready to get our high school diploma. But because we got our visa, we were not willing to stick around. So we left Romania without a high school diploma. I arrived in Israel speaking no Hebrew. Now we had to learn Hebrew and learn about Jewish history, Jewish literature, language, and Bible. And Bible was the biggest problem. I had to learn 40 chapters by heart, which I couldn't possibly learn. And I flunked Bible 3 times. I could not get my high school diploma in Israel. And so I arrived in the United States after I married my husband without a high school diploma. I learned a lot of English. I learned English very fast, and one of the best ways, in addition to watching television, was that my children were growing up, and they wanted me to read them fairy tales. And I loved those fairy tales because I could understand the words. It was the level of my English knowledge. And I read them with great enthusiasm. And I continued to read with my children. And then one of my friends suggested that I knew enough English to get a high school diploma. And I needed a high school diploma because I wanted to be a realtor, and I couldn't go to real estate school without it. So I applied for a test, a GED, and I passed it immediately, got my high school diploma. Now that I had a high school diploma, I wanted a college degree. So I decided to go to school, and actually a funny story, I took my first class, was Holocaust education, and I went up to the professor and I told him that I hoped I wasn't going to flunk his class because it would have been very embarrassing to survive the real thing and flunk his class. He didn't understand what I was saying, but that was the reason that I took Holocaust 101, because the academic world was very threatening to me, and I wanted something that I was familiar with. I went to college for 11 years and graduated in 1990 with a degree, Bachelor of Science. And I'm glad I did the work because I feel very proud to be able to accomplish it.
Eva, what is your favorite food?
Well, my most favorite song is the Man from La Mancha, The Impossible Dream. I'll try. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, I think that's about it I can remember right now. I know to reach the impossible dream.
She was ahead of me because that's usually my closing question. Does anybody have any other questions to me or to my mom? I don't want to extend my welcome too long, but I know you all have probably studies and do homework, right? Any other questions? Yes.
About the hologram.
Yeah.
And you seem to enjoy.
Oh, I use it all the time. So it was created before my mom died. So the question is, if you couldn't hear talk about the hologram. So this was done by the USC Shoah Foundation. Steven Spielberg started, obviously, and it's a funny story. They picked 12 survivors. My mom wasn't one of the 12. I didn't know this part of the story until after my mom died. Stephen Smith, who worked under Steven Spielberg, was in charge of the USC Shoah Foundation. So he gets a phone call about 2013. Hi, Mr. Smith. My name's Eva Kor. I hear you're doing holograms. Eva, well, it's very experimental. It's very expensive. How can I help you? Well, I'm a survivor. We need to meet. I need to be one of the holograms. Well, Eva, I'd like to meet you too. I'm going to be traveling a lot. Where will you be? Well, I'll be in New York, and then I'll be in D.C. Oh, I'll be in D.C. too. We can meet there. What hotel are you staying at? So I was living in D.C. My mom calls me and says, I've been chosen to be one of the holograms. That's all I knew. So I said, where's the meet? Oh, it's just down the street. Perfect. I'll pick you up. So I take her there, and I remember, I think I looked up Stephen Smith. I said, Mom, I think that's him. I got to go. So I went to work, and apparently Stephen Smith sat down with my mom and had every intention to talk her out of it. Within 15 minutes, my mom convinced him that she should be the 13th survivor. So I didn't know any different. So my mom tells me a couple of months later, Eli Lilly paid a lot of money for my mom to be the hologram, the 13th hologram. Several months later, we flew to California. I was there for a couple of days. They asked her questions from 8 to 5, 8 days in a row. I think in the middle of the week, they gave her 1 day break. Most of the time, the survivors would go to Rodeo Drive to shop. On that day off, my mom went to Watts to lecture to kids behind barbed wire. So the last day, and all the kids had hoodies. My mom hated hoodies. So every time Stephen Smith did this with a survivor, after the last day of taping, he would have a party at his house. And so at the party, he gives my mom a sweatshirt with a hoodie and says something like, I went through Auschwitz to get this. And so I didn't know any of the story until after my mom died. Stephen called me and said, are you doing a celebration of life? It took like 2 weeks to get my mom's body back from Poland to Indiana. And I said, yeah. He goes, I'm coming in. I'm going to talk. So, good question.
Thanks.
Any others? And if you want to talk to my mom to answer your question, I had no problems doing this. But if you want to talk to her, it's eyewitness. I can send to the link, and you can do the same thing I do. It's very easy. So thank you very much for being a good audience, a great audience. Appreciate your time.